Welcome to This Explainer. We live in an era of just absolute, unprecedented comfort, access, and privilege. We really do. But if you look around, or honestly, if you just look within yourself, you might notice this quiet, persistent ache. Like so many modern thinkers have pointed out, a lot of us are feeling adrift, anxious, and, well, desperately unhappy. Today, we're going to explore a really profound philosophical paradox. We're going to examine why it is that the harder we try to grasp happiness, the more it literally seems to slip right through our fingers. And, more importantly, what we can actually do about it. So I want you to just sit with this question for a second. What if happiness isn't something you find, but something that appears when you stop chasing it? We tend to treat happiness like it's a destination on a map, right? Like it's a place we can finally arrive at if we just paddle hard enough. But the thinkers, the psychologists, and the philosophers we're going to look at today suggest something entirely different. They suggest that our frantic pursuit is actually the exact thing keeping us from the peace we crave. Section 1. The Happiness Trap. So, modern culture aggressively conditions us to view happiness as this tangible asset, something that can be bought or earned or shown off. Scott Galloway actually refers to our current era as the age of wealth porn. Think about it. Every single time you open social media, you're bombarded with this simulated, perfectly curated reality. It's like an invisible, exhausting treadmill that just constantly reminds you of what you haven't achieved yet. And, as Robert Greene points out, we totally fall victim to the grass is always greener syndrome. The very second we get what we want, our minds just drift to something new, something slightly out of reach. To cope with this, Seth Godin notes that we get stuck in what he calls a status loop. We buy what he refers to as armor, like $400 sneakers. We don't buy them because we actually need them. We buy them to buy status, just desperately hoping it'll finally make us feel like we belong. Now, this exhausting cycle of consumption and comparison leads us right into a devastating psychological trap. Robert Greene talks about this concept called hyper-intention. Okay, think about the last time you desperately needed to fall asleep. The harder you tried to force it, the more you stared at the clock, the more wide awake you became, right? Well, happiness works the exact same way. When we try to manufacture happy moments, or when we're obsessively keeping score of our own joy, it almost always just breeds anxiety and disappointment. The most pleasurable things in life actually happen as a byproduct of living well, not as a target you can just aim at and hit. Section 2. Meaning versus happiness. Okay, so if we can't directly target happiness without pushing it away, what on earth should we be aiming for? Author Paul Millerd frames this so beautifully by contrasting what he calls the default path with the pathless path. Imagine doing everything exactly right. You follow all the rules, you get the degree, you land the promotion, you buy the house. That's the default path. It's this rigid achievement narrative that promises us external success will equal internal joy. But millions of people reach the end of that path only to feel deeply, profoundly empty. The pathless path, on the other hand, well, it requires courage. It's about embracing uncertainty, completely ignoring the script society hands you, and basically self-authoring your life to discover where you can genuinely be useful. And this shift, moving from seeking pleasure to seeking purpose, is a really ancient one. In his work on discipline, Ryan Holiday channels the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius. Aurelius used to ask himself this exact question on the mornings he really didn't want to get out of bed. He'd ask, were we born just to feel nice? No, we were born to do our duty as human beings. And this isn't just some abstract philosophy. This idea was forged in the absolute darkest of fires by the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Surviving the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust, Frankl observed that what actually sustains human beings through profound suffering is never the fragile pursuit of pleasantness. It is the unshakable pursuit of meaning. Meaning is the anchor. Happiness is really just the weather. Section 3. The success illusion. Harvard professor Dr. Ben Shahar calls this psychological blind spot the arrival fallacy. Take the story of NBA star Kevin Durant, for example, which Paul Millerd highlights. Durant spent his entire life sweating, bleeding, and sacrificing everything to chase a championship. But when he finally held that trophy in his hands, he didn't feel this lasting, transcendent joy. Actually, he felt confused. He was searching for what it all meant, only to realize that reaching the absolute pinnacle of his sport didn't fundamentally change who he was, and it definitely didn't erase his inner complexities. Ryan Holiday experienced a remarkably similar thing in his own career. He wrote, "You know deep down that accomplishing things won't make you happy, but I think I always fantasized that it would at least feel really good. I was so wrong." And honestly, there is something quietly terrifying about reaching the top of the mountain, only to look around and realize that there's nothing there. The money, the followers, the promotions, These are basically just a trick of human evolution. They offer this temporary dopamine hit, a fleeting illusion of satisfaction, and then our baseline just abruptly resets. And we're left hungry once again for the next milestone. Robert Greene warns us that making wealth, status, or fame our primary objective creates what he calls a false purpose. When we organize our entire lives around these external metrics, it inevitably leads downward into soulless workaholism and burnout. We never truly cultivate our unique, innate talents. Instead, we become alienated from ourselves. We literally end up running a race that has no finish line, simply exhausting ourselves just to feel slightly superior to the person next to us. Section 4. Building a meaningful life. So if the traditional ladder of success is just an illusion, how do we actually cultivate a life that matters? Paul Millerd calls this transition the second chapter of success, and it requires a pretty radical shift. You have to go from focusing on what you lack to focusing on what you actually have to offer. The Roman Stoic Seneca wisely pointed out that possessions are completely meaningless unless you have someone to share them with. Deepening our relationships is the true bedrock of a satisfying life. Beyond that, we have to seek to be useful. Eleanor Roosevelt believed that usefulness is its own reward. It's the rent we pay for the privilege of living. When we pursue mastery just for the sake of it, when we serve others, and when we leave quiet time for active contemplation, that is when joy finally arrives. Not as a target, but as a completely natural consequence of a life well lived. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman observed this profoundly simple truth about our days. True security, true flourishing, they do not come from acquiring more things to fill a void. They come from reclaiming your autonomy. It's about deliberately choosing your fuel. So you have to ask yourself, are you being fueled by a frantic desire to outpace your neighbor? Or are you fueled by a quiet desire to master a craft, nurture your mind, and share your gifts with your community? Section 5. Practical reflection. To help integrate all this philosophy into our actual lives, let's walk through these really unhurried steps outlined by Paul Millerd. First, question the default narrative. Does the standard path actually serve your soul, or is it just feeding your ego? Second, you've got to define your personal enough. Knowing your financial and emotional enough gives you the supreme freedom to just say no to things that drain you. Third, reconnect with what made you feel alive in the past, long before the world told you what you should care about. And finally, be patient. Finding your unique contribution to the world is a slow, unfolding journey. You have to leave quiet space for those answers to emerge. Consider these gentle prompts inspired by the minds we've explored today. Maybe even jot them down. Take a moment and ask yourself, am I forcing things too hard through hyperintention? Whose expectations am I really trying to meet here? Seth Godin provocatively asks, what is the work you are afraid to do? Because usually the thing we're avoiding is the exact thing our nature is calling us toward. By shifting from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of offering, we profoundly change our entire relationship with the world. Ultimately, this all comes down to a fundamental shift in perspective. If you spend your whole life fiercely chasing happiness, you are always going to be running. But if you stop, if you just stand still, and you find something meaningful to build or to serve or to protect, happiness will quietly sit down right beside you. The happiest people rarely wake up asking, how can I be happy today? They wake up asking, what is worth doing today? So what is worth doing for you?